You've mentioned a bunch of risks, and there are a number of them that you've covered, but there's a couple of sort of two headline ones: high level of government debt and potentially household debt concerns, given the fact that people are just paying higher and higher prices into property. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, well, government debt's a big concern. It's going to hit $1 trillion by 2025. So we have spent a lot of money getting us through this pandemic, and at some point, we're going to have that discussion about how we pay it back. Right now, there's very little discussion around it. And, I don't think I've read anything about what would be the strategy for the government to get out of this. And probably like like most households at the moment, it's not such a concern with the interest rates so low, but we know interest rates don't stay as low as now forever. So, there will be a stage at which it becomes problematic. I think it will have to be something that hits the economy pretty hard in terms of taxation. Possibly an increase to GST might be an option. That would be probably provide the biggest bang for buck, whereas trying to fiddle around with, more complicated or targeted sectors would be a little bit more difficult and probably wouldn't raise as much cash as quickly. So there will be a discussion, but my bet is on probably the GST will be the thing that's impacted.
I'm in that camp, Nerida. I think it's the only place that we can really get that bang for buck. And I'm a big believer in a consumption tax, because people who spend more pay more. And I think that's also good in terms of equalising out for those people. So as long as there's a reasonable safety net, it makes sense to me. Hey, good segue in terms of debt levels and talking about property. Let's move the conversation over to the property side. We're 18 months on from sort of the first panic that came through. Did you see that we would still be seeing, growth rates of 18 to 22% that are coming through in Sydney, Brisbane, Southeast Queensland, Melbourne less so because of obviously the continued lockdowns? Was that something that you saw coming through, and now when you look back on that, does it sort of make sense to you?
It's interesting. Early on, there was an economist out of the US, and I wish I remembered his name, but it was like probably early April, and I read an article that he'd written about this being a productivity crisis, not being a financial crisis. And so what does that mean for property? It means there'll still be money around. There's going to be problems with labour markets, and we'll see rising unemployment, and that could hit pricing. And then as things evolved, we saw the unemployment problem was amongst young people. So, then it became like, okay, well, this is hitting rental markets. It's not hitting ownership markets. And then I think at that time, by about September, I think everyone was kind of relieved that the property market hadn't bombed and the economy was growing again, and, things were moving full steam ahead. I think we're at a point now, though, that people are getting alarmed at pricing, definitely house prices. We had Josh Frydenberg announce the inquiry into household affordability. So, that was in July. And, housing affordability isn't just about debt. It's about planning controls. It's about construction costs. It's about supply, so it's a bigger issue that does need to be addressed. But I think on the debt side, when we have a look at the amount that's being lent, it is now double what was lent in May 2020. So we have seen this very sharp acceleration in lending, and it's actually $10 billion more than what was lent at the last peak, which was in March 2017. So on one hand, house prices, that's one issue, and affordability is one issue, but it's a long-term issue that needs to be looked at more closely. But I think on the immediate side, the level of debt that's being taken on, and people taking advantage of very low interest rates, and also banks really keen to lend because, as the bank CEOs have said, they have so much cash they don't know what to do with it. So it is something that, on one hand, it's nice to get cheap and easy debt, but on the other hand, it's not nice to have it once interest rates start to increase, or alternatively, if economic conditions start to deteriorate and we do see an increase in the unemployment rate.